Hi, Eddie. Here's problem 10. I'm going to do it two ways because I don't know which way you're doing it. One way that you could do it is just look at the denominators. So I have n plus 1, I have an n plus 1, and I have an n. So the least common denominator of all of those is n times n plus 1. And what I could do is you can multiply that on the numerator and on the denominator. But then you're going to have to take it and you're going to have to distribute it to the n, to the 5, and to the 12 times n plus 1. So when I do that distribution, there's absolutely nothing that's going to cancel out. There's going to be no common factors when you multiply it by the n or you multiply it by the 5. Okay, so I'm left with n and then times n plus 1 plus 5 times n plus 1 minus, but then you have a common factor when you distribute it to here. You have a common factor of the n plus 1, so you should just be left with a minus 12n. So that becomes your entire big old numerator. Okay, in the denominator, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take the n plus 1 and I have to distribute it to this term, and I have to distribute it to this term. Well, when you distribute it to the first term, the n plus 1s are going to be your common factor. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. Okay? And what you're left with is n times n plus 9. When you multiply it to the second term, so I'm taking this and I'm multiplying it like this, then the n's are going to be my common factor, and I am left with minus 5 n plus 1. So what you have left to do is some distribution property and some combining of like terms. So let's do the main numerator. Okay, what you're going to be left with is n squared. I'm going to do this in parts. N squared times n plus 1. Then when I distribute the 5n, it'll be plus 5n squared plus 5n minus 12n. In the denominator, I'll have n squared plus 9n minus 5n minus 5. Okay, so let's combine some like terms and see what's going on. Okay, so in the numerator, I'm left with n to the third plus n squared plus 5n squared plus 5n minus 12n. And in the denominator, I am left with n squared plus 4n minus 5. All right, so let's scroll down. And in the next step, my numerator, oh, that wasn't very straight, was it? Okay, in the numerator, I am going to be left with n to the third. And then it looks like plus 6n squared. And then it looks like a minus 7n. Okay, the denominator is going to factor. It's going to factor into n plus 5 times n minus 1. Okay. Now my numerator factors. I can pull out a GCF of an n. And I'm left with n squared plus 6n minus 7 My denominator is going to stay the same. Okay, the numerator is going to factor again. So, oops. So I'm going to end up with, come on, I'm going to end up with n times n plus 7 times n minus 1. The denominator is going to end up with the same, and you should have a common factor of n minus 1, and then that's how you get your final answer of n times n plus 7 over n plus 5. Another way that you could do the same problem, let's pull up a new page, is if you wanted to get a common denominator in the main numerator and a common denominator in the main denominator. So here we go, because I don't know if that made sense. It's getting late. Okay, so what I could do is I could make all of this. So I've got, here, let's do this. I have an n. I have a 5. And I have 12. And it looks like I've got a plus here. I've got a minus here. Okay, so 12 already has an n plus 1 as, hello, type. An n plus 1, I cannot type tonight, n plus 1 as, you get the drift, as a denominator. Do I have caps lock on? Now they're off, okay. Now, if I want to make an n plus 1 down here, then I have to multiply the top and the bottom by 1, which is n plus 1, and I have to do the same thing over here. Oops. So this is going to yield, if I simplify that numerator, okay, I'm going to be left with an n plus 1 in the denominator. And in the numerator, I'm going to start doing some distribution. It's going to be n squared plus n plus 5n plus 5 minus 12. All right, now let's talk about that denominator. Okay, over here, I want to have a common denominator of n times n plus 1. So I have an n plus 9 up at the top. And in order for me to yield a common denominator, I need to multiply it by an additional n, so that I'm really just multiplying by the number 1. I have a minus here. And then over here, we had a 5 originally, but then it did not have an n plus 1 on bottom. So I need to multiply that by n plus 1. So that again, I am multiplying that by the number 1. So what that looks like down here I keep my common denominator. And up top, I'm going to end up with n squared plus 9n minus 5n minus 5. Okay, I'm going to do a lot in this next step. Okay. Remember that dividing is the same as multiplying by reciprocal. So I'm going to simplify this numerator, okay, and it is going to become n squared plus 6n minus 7, and plus 1 is going to stay. Okay, now I'm going to flip. So I'm going to move this guy, and he's going to become the numerator. Remember, when you divide, it becomes a times. And then I'm going to simplify n squared plus 9n minus 5, and it becomes the denominator down here. So it simplifies into n squared plus 4n minus 5. Okay. And I'm going to do some factoring above it. N squared plus 6n minus 7 is n plus 7, n minus 1. And n squared plus 4n becomes, minus 5 becomes n plus 5, n minus 1. And what you end up with are the following common factors. The n plus 1s are going to cancel. These n minus 1s are going to cancel. And so what you have left is n plus 7 times n all over n plus 5. Hope this helped you, Eddie. Have a good night.